Welcome to our monthly ACTS Town Hall. Thanks to our member companies for helping make these town halls possible. Your support makes our mission a reality. Together in safety, stronger in collaboration. The ACTS Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. These town halls are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. If you have a question, please type it into the chat or click the raise hand icon. Give us a few seconds, and we will permit you to unmute yourself. To unmute, click on the microphone icon in the top right corner of your screen. Please try to keep your comments brief to allow others time to interact. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent via email after the town hall has concluded. Before the end of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We are pleased to have a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us today. So to get us started, our moderator will begin with brief introductions.
Thank you everyone for joining this town hall, and this is a very interesting topic that I'm looking forward to myself learning something and from this event with these fine panelists we have here. So first, let's go around and have the panelists introduce themselves. Excuse me, their what they do and what their company does, please. Let's start with Tommy.
Yeah, my name's Tommy Hanberg. I work for Flatiron Construction in Denver, Colorado. Got 8 years experience in the industry. We are a heavy civil contractor across all of North America. Pleased to be here this morning.
Okay. Excuse me. Thank you, Tommy. Will, can you just something quick about you, your company, and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Will Waldsmith. I'm a field safety supervisor here at CST Utilities. We are an underground utility infrastructure contractor. We do everything from installation, maintenance, repairs, replacements, that kind of thing. I've been with the company for 6 years and started as a laborer for a bore crew. So I've had my hand on a shovel digging up quite a few of these utilities we're going to be talking about myself.
Cool. Hopefully digging up in a safe way, of course.
Oh, of course.
Whitney, has Gary joined us yet?
Doesn't look like Gary's on yet. He might join a little bit later. I'll let you know once he jumps on.
Okay, well, let's get started. And my apologies again. I don't believe my video is working. That might not be a bug, but that might be a feature for all of you. But let's go ahead. So let's utilities in an open trench. First, let's start at the beginning. Why are there utilities in an open trench to begin with? Either one of you, feel free to jump in. Just kind of give an overview for our participants.
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's what makes the world go round. So at least in my world, a lot of our projects, they're not greenfield, right? They've all been touched. So unless there's a plan prior to the project to relocate the utilities, I mean, you're going to have, sewer, water, gas, telecom, all these different things that are in the ground, allowing us to live the way we currently do.
Okay. Will, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. In most cases, we're limited to the easements that we're allowed to work in. In some cases, we have a new build. Those are wide open areas, relatively untouched. But most of the time, especially with repairs and replacements, that ground is pretty well taken up with everything from communications, water, septic, sewer. It's a very, in most cases, narrow stretch of land that we're allowed to work in. And that's why there's a lot of what we're seeing in there.
Great.
Yeah,
so,
just to,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
Jamie, just to add to that, a lot of times in the heavy civil side, we don't touch existing utilities unless they interfere with the design, right? So you're talking about road grade, elevations of pipe, all that different stuff.
So, by the way, I forgot to mention, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. And I believe someone, I think Randy, is monitoring that, and we'll jump in with the questions. So, our next, I guess, topic is: have you observed throughout your years of experience the excavation work, the trenches are getting more and more busy with facilities over the years that you've been in the business? Because as our population increases and population density increases in some areas, have you noticed that getting more and more congested, or has it been about the same?
I can start off with this one. I think it's getting quite a bit more congested. You have areas where overhead lines are getting moved underground. Fiber optic cable is becoming more and more popular. It's taking up more space in there. So yes, it is absolutely becoming a busier area.
Yeah. Tommy, have you noticed anything different, or is that similar to your areas?
Yeah, no, I would agree with exactly what he said. As population increases, there's only so much space to put things in the ground. We have a job where we found a duct bank, and we contacted the utility owner, and they literally rent out the conduit that runs through the duct bank for fiber optics. So, yeah, I agree 100% with what Will said.
Okay. So who is in charge of pre-con utility coordination in the areas that you work in?
Yeah, I can start with that one. So it's kind of a combination depending on what type of utility coordination we're talking about. So it could be the utility owner and our client, right? So a city or CDOT, something like that. If they have to work together to move a utility based on the engineer's design, and then we could play a role ultimately, ensuring that our schedule and all of that isn't hindered by the actions that have to be taken for the pre-con utility coordination. Take it a step further, right? Once you get past that, ultimately it falls back on the contractor, right? So you call 811, get all the locates out there, and then go out, pothole, put your story sticks in, build as-built, shoot everything in, and then go out there, and before you do anything, you know where everything is in the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot of it's the project coordinator, the supervisor, and the foreman planning out that job. That's basically it. Yeah.
Jimmy,
So
I have
yeah,
a
go ahead.
question from chat here, if you'd like to address it. How are excavators going to determine which utilities they find when daylighting is the active or abandoned utility lines? I guess they assume if you find a line, what is it? But
I'll start off with that one. In my experiences, a lot of them look differently, are presented differently. In some cases, they have to be. In the case of water lines, there's only certain materials that make up water lines. Your PVCs, usually blue. Your copper lines, things like that. Electric lines are fairly obvious, whether it's concentric lines that are wrapped in a type of, looks like grounding rod, or have a red stripe that's jacketed. And some cases you have to do further investigation because some of them do look similar.
Yeah, I would just ask for a little bit of clarification on that. Are we asking, like, when you come up on something that was unexpected? If Doug Beck, I see that you put that in the chat. If you could, maybe type in something there, because it kind of changes based on what you're talking about. So at least our company, oh, there he goes. Underground utility pipe, underground. Okay, I see what he's saying. at least for us, our company, the way we run things, if you come up on an unknown, we call 811, right? Try to figure it out. There are different regulations based on the owner or the state that you work in, where, you know, if you put an electrical line down, you gotta, you know, lay the ribbon out on top of it, notifying people as they're getting down to that what it is, right? So maybe that's below your squeegee. Yeah.
Okay. So at a high level, can you describe your company's policies and procedures with regards to exposed facilities in an open trench?
Yeah, 100%. So we have our own internal engineering group. So we work with the utility owner directly and then our client and see what specs the utility owner lays out. And then we go back to our engineering group and specifically ask them for a design that aligns with the specifications required by the owner to support something. Now, as far as like um, protecting active utilities from like strikes, let's say in a trench, we go so far as to use street plates, other forms of protection that we can.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree with that. A lot of it has to do with the engineers. Planning plays a huge role in that, and then protecting them while they're exposed. In most cases, you have your whole coverings. In rare cases, you're going to use some sort of support system, but in my experience, the way that you plan out your trench can kind of mitigate the exposure of that utility.
Okay, great. You know, as we were putting together the session, I approached this gigantic excavator about this topic, and initially they said, "Yeah, I'll happy to be on it." And then a few days later, they said, "You know, we looked at our procedures, and we're just not confident that we have the best procedure. I'm not confident we have our procedures down." And the reason I'm bringing that up is, do you think, like, what you guys have seen out there in your many years of experience, do you see a lot of companies that maybe don't have these procedures down and they're kind of ad hocing it? Or because I was surprised by how, I guess, dissatisfied they were with their procedure once they started looking at it. Like, what are your thoughts? Have you encountered something like that?
Yeah, yeah, I would say, um, you know, as a large heavy civil contractor, we have subcontractors that work for us, and they either have to adhere to or exceed our standards. And a lot of times when they're getting ready to sign the subcontract, you know, some of our policies and procedures in regards to utilities are brought up in question, and then they have to add money to it, right? Because um, unfortunately, outside of working with us, they're not doing it correctly. Um, and I think it depends on the size of the company, the competency of the employees working for the company. All of that goes back to, you know, how well we're protecting the utilities.
I agree. I think part of it might be due to the difficulty of there's a lot of variation when you get in the ground, and having an overall encompassing policy can seem daunting to get all of those different variables put on paper. It's understandable. I think a lot of it comes down to the actual hands-on training in the field when dealing with these different scenarios.
Right. Okay. What have you ever, has your company ever, you know, you started working in an open trench and you discover an exposed facility that has some legacy damage, right? Damage that uh, is it's damaged, but it hasn't stopped the facility from working, so it hasn't been reported yet. Have you ever had that happen, or maybe it's new damage that was just caused by the exposing of the facility? What have you ever had that happen? And if so, what do you do in that situation?
Oh, sure. It happens all the time. Sometimes we'll be sent out to do maybe a septic investigation. We'll camera it. We'll see a damage maybe on the customer side, and then when we actually go to uncover it, we'll see that that damage has continued onto the main line, the city side. So it does add extra complication. That's something that you have to notify people of because you're not just going to cover it up and repair what you were hired to repair and move on. It involves inspectors and things like that, and it does happen quite often because when I started, we were uh, putting in new conduits for electrical lines. So a lot of the times we'd be called out there to bore in a new line. It was because there was already a fault with the current system, and we'd start excavating, sometimes with hydro excavation, and we'd find an old splice that had been pieced together there. So it was already damaged. It also poses a risk to the employees that are working on it because that is a weak spot in the line. So when we would come across something like a splice in an electric line, we'd have to call to make sure everything was okay. Things would be tested. In some cases, they'd come out and isolate that section of line for us so that we could continue our excavation and have to take certain safety measures to make sure that none of our employees were at risk. And I mean, occasionally that involves outages.
Okay, Tommy, you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, I agree with everything that he said. I would just say from like the liability standpoint, the minute that it's found, just start taking photos, right? With our work, we typically have engineers out on the job site, quality control, quality assurance, get them over there, get them involved. They're typically the owner's representative. They know the work that you're doing at the time, and start getting statements from everybody involved. So when it comes time to actually pay for the damage or the cost of a crew coming out to look at it, you don't get wrapped up in that.
All right. So ultimately, whose responsibility is it to protect exposed facilities in an open trench in your state or your areas, right? I guess if it's exposed, your company may not be the only one that's working in that trench, right? And who pays for protecting what's been exposed?
Yeah, so in our world, the heavy civil world, we are ultimately responsible for protecting the utility in the trench. And typically we don't have more than one company. If we do, it's two subcontractors that are working for us, and we have to work that out between them on who's going to eat the price. There was a second part to your question, Jimmy, and I just drew a blank.
I think you got it. Will, you have anything to add to that? Basically, who's if there's if there's more than one party working in it, whose responsibility is it to pay for it?
I have very rarely seen that. I know most of the time you're going to have the excavation contractor is going to be liable for protecting those. There's some amount of liability held on the owner to mark and locate them. And if two contractors are working in the same area, they are not allowed to work on each other's marks. Each one of them has to separately call in what they are doing specifically in that area and have that marked and located.
Okay, perfect. If there are delays in project and loss of production due to utilities in an open trench, who pays for that? Who ultimately bears the cost?
Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer. But I will say, the way we do work, we look at a set of plans, we put a bid together, and if we win, then we're going to work. If we miss that and it was in the plans, then we ultimately have to eat the cost, right? But if it's an unknown, then from our perspective, we're going to take that up with the owner and either potentially overrun on quantities, or you're going to get a change order.
Okay.
Yeah, he touched on something really big there, and that's who's going to be ultimately responsible for it is where the fault lies. As with most things, whoever caused whatever specific incident that happened, um, he brought up planning, which if there is an additional cost due to not complete planning or poor planning, something unknown that could have been accounted for, that's going to fall on, your estimators or your project coordinators. If there is, how do I want to word this? Something unknown due to poor marks or mismarks, that could be something that falls to the owner of the utility, since it's their responsibility to mark it. However, there's an old phrase I used to hear guys say out in the field: "No paint, no problem." It's not necessarily the case, because even if those marks could be off, if you have prior knowledge, you can still be held liable if you've done jobs in that area and you've documented that you've uncovered it before, or if there's something obvious there that would give you prior knowledge without those marks, such as a curb box or a meter, something obvious, any kind of knowledge can make you liable for those.
Right. Lots of interesting discussion in the chat about 3822, but uh, those interested can go to the chat to take a look at that. How have the methods and best practices regarding utilities in open trench changed over time? I don't mean from the start of from when dinosaurs were around, but from just over the past few years that you've been involved. Have they changed at all significantly, and if so, in what way?
Yeah, they're always changing. And unfortunately, most of the changes and the positive changes come from damages and errors. And hopefully, we learn from our mistakes. It's what breeds new policies and procedures. Is trying to find out from those mishaps.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Let
would
me
just
have another question from chat here. It says, would excavators like yourselves see a value in facility owners such as natural gas providing infield training on peculiarities of pipe material and how to respond to a damaged line?
100%. We'd love anything like that. I know out here in Colorado with Xcel Energy, back in the day, guys used to carry a clamp or they'd pinch something off. Talking specifically about gas here, and they don't like us to do that at all anymore. There's a lot of hazards associated with it. So, yeah, I think any contractor that's would say that a training like that from the owner would be worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely, I agree. I think we do have, at least here in our case, we have something similar to that implemented. All of our bore crews that currently bore in our gas conduit for some of the gas companies in our area, they all have to be OQ certified. They have to have their operator qualifications. We actually send them to a facility to do training and testing through a company that the gas company has set up for them to do.
Okay, great. I believe Tommy said he has to leave at 11 Central. So Whitney and Tyler, do we have someone who can potentially take his place, or Will's going to be on the hot seat by himself here, um, which could be interesting also. But if you guys can work on that, um, what what are some common mistakes that you have seen in the field? Not necessarily by your company. I'm not saying about your company, but just what are some common mistakes or uh, failure to use best practices that you have seen in the field with regards to exposed facilities in an open trench?
Yeah, I would say the most common error, and I'll end with this. I know we're supposed to kind of wrap it up at the end of the call with like our punchline here is lack of planning, right? The more proactive you can be when it comes to protecting utilities in a trench or excavating near utilities, working around live utilities, anything like that, you need to do as much planning as possible. In fact, our our policy when it comes to underground utilities, if we can't physically protect the utility um, in the trench, and we gotta get an excavator near it, we've got to work with the utility owner to get it shut off while we do our work, which I think is common with a lot of companies, right? But in order to make that happen, there's a ton of coordination that has to occur.
Absolutely. I had the same thing in my notes, 100%. The more planning and the more comprehensive the planning can be, the smoother things are gonna go. There's so many variables on these job sites, but if you can account for most of them, it's going to make the process a lot smoother. You're going to have reduced damages, reduced safety hazards across the board. It's really just about being comprehensive when you get out there and doing everything you can, even if it's before, say, accepting a bid, actually calling in that ticket to get a better idea of what you're going to be dealing with that particular job. I 100% agree.
But hey, I just
Okay.
want to say thank you, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. So, Will, I have a couple more questions here, and I think Whitney and Tyler are working on if we can find some other volunteers slash victims for the panel to join you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just anytime throughout chat, we can encourage chat to raise their hand and ask any questions they may have. We can have them unmuted and go for it.
Okay, great. So, is there a tactic or procedure you use, Will, that you and your team use that is like it's like a life hack, right? It's like a hack in a good way. That like in a video game that gets you to the next level that you use very effectively that you don't see a lot of other people using that you might be able to share and others may be able to leverage that for their own benefit.
Ooh, life hack. We do. I think one thing that's gotten us out of a couple jams is uh, potholing as much as possible, getting eyes on that utility. Verification is very big, and let's say you're running alongside of one, even if the marks are accurate in most places, taking that time to make that extra pothole, if you got the equipment out there to do it real quick, specifically with, I don't know what a lot of people's backgrounds are, but me coming from boring, I'm always thinking of directional drills and doing that. If you can make a spot hole deep enough that you can see your drill head going through the bottom of it, that's extremely beneficial because whether you're getting improper readings or you just having those marks verified, getting the eyes on it, getting measurements with the tape measure, that's been a great boon because in the ground, uh, I've seen some of those utilities doing some wild things. I've seen services marked to houses where 3/4 of the way it's maintaining its depth, and then that 1/4 that we're actually doing our work in, they left a loop in it and didn't take out any of that line, so it came up to just about 4 inches under the ground. There's a lot of variation, so verifying as much as possible, and don't leave anything up to chance.
Okay, great. There's a question in chat. It's about Washington State. I don't know if you do any work in Washington State at CST Utilities there, Will, but the question is, in Washington State, there's a law that says if you're digging around live high voltage electric, you must call and have it de-energized. While that rarely happens, have you heard of that? Do the states that you work in at CS Utilities do any of those states have that law or regulation or anything?
Not here, not currently. I can imagine if there was enough call for it, it could be something that happens. We do a lot of digging on live electric ourselves. We always use the safest methods, and I've personally never seen any kind of danger to it. It sounds dangerous. A lot of it comes down to training. I remember when I first started, it was something that was stressed very much so, to the point where I had to stand there and watch a guy dig so he could show me exactly the processes. That's nothing that we have here, but I can definitely see how if an area had the need for regulation like that, it would happen.
Okay. So with regards to the exposed facilities in open trenches, so from someone like me, I haven't worked on that personally. So it's exposed. Do you and your team put like bright colored things, tape markers on it, or to make everyone in that area even more aware that, hey, this is an exposed facility because it has, I don't know, it has a yellow tape on it, or is it already obvious enough that it's exposed and everyone knows, okay, it's exposed and it's there?
In most cases, it is kind of an obvious thing where you can see it in there. We generally take the time to, once it's exposed, to uncover it a little bit more, not enough to leave it exposed. So it's just, it kind of sticks out more. It's not just stuck in the wall there. Somebody might put a hand on it or start digging into that wall. We kind of uncover it enough to where it's completely obvious. We have had the cases, just due to the shape of the excavation, we've been worried about something falling in, or there being a hazard of it rubbing against equipment. So we'll take the extra step to protect it then. 90% of the time, it's pretty obvious. The dangers are inherent, and it's just part of the training not to, you know, mess with those kind of things in any way. But we do have the cases where they do need protected, just because the variables and the shapes of holes that you can dig, we get into some weird spots. No two holes are ever the same. So sometimes you need to take those extra steps.
This is obviously a topic a lot of people are passionate about. The chat is going crazy. I'm just trying to keep up. So there's some notion here in the chat about potholing. Potholing should be mandatory for at least some kinds of excavations, but it's generally not. What are your thoughts about? I mean, you don't need to put your lawyer hat on, but just about potholing. Potholing. Why isn't it used more? How much could it increase safety if it were used more or mandated? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I know why it's not used more, and that's production, and that's the wrong answer. I 100% agree. There should be some sort of regulation with different excavations. I know it's saved us so many times. You just can't trust those marks. They need verified. It's different in every state. In our state, it is 18 inches from the line that they put down. So let's say you're having a sewer marked, and it's not just 18 inches. It's our I'm trying to think of the word. I'm having a brain fart now. It's 18 inches from the edge of the utility. So if that utility is 2 foot wide, you have another 18 inches on either side of that. So those marks, they are extremely helpful, but they are not always accurate. And being able to actually physically see and get measurements on them, I can't stress how beneficial that is, because just and if you've seen some of these marks put down, they leave some gaps in there. They cover themselves. So definitely, I see all kinds of benefit to just making that a regulation, be it a certain type of digging, and then having to do, say, just for example, every 50 foot on a stretch, or if you're within so many feet of it, just having a tolerance zone there. I could definitely see the benefit to that.
Okay. Uh, again, lots of chatter, like useful chatter in the chat box. But I'm going to try to stick to the original topic, which is exposed facilities in open trench. How often does this scenario happen where the facility is exposed in an open trench, and it's been marked properly, and it still gets cut, it still gets damaged somehow? Like, again, I don't mean necessarily by CST utilities. It's something you've seen out in the field in your years there. Just so it's exposed, it's marked, it's highly visible, yet it somehow still gets cut. I mean, have you ever seen that happen?
In my experience, mostly the stuff that's getting damaged is the stuff that you don't see until it's too late. It does have a chance. Like there's failures in everything. You could maybe have a mechanical failure with the equipment, where you're keeping a good clearance from it, and you have a hydraulic hose break or a pin breaks and your bucket falls off and maybe strikes it. But in most cases, outside of those incidents, if you see it, you have a much more likely chance of keeping that intact and undamaged than the the un the unseen.
Right. Okay. Anything else? We're going to wrap it up, and then the AXE team is going to play a video here to close out this great session. Anything else you want to add with regards to your thoughts on this topic, protecting exposed facilities in open trench here, Will?
I think Tommy really hit on something when he brought up the planning. I think that's probably the some of the most overlooked and some of the biggest proponents to keeping these things intact, safe, keeping on our end production up. Is I know I've personally shown up to jobs where things were just not accounted for, and it adds man hours, extra equipment rentals when things aren't accounted for, certain depths. um, if we're expecting something to be uh, 3.5 foot deep, and when we actually start breaking ground and we're down 7 foot and it's not in the right location, now we're talking about the cost of getting shoring out there, and just different equipment to go deeper, just all kinds of added expenses. So the thing that I want to stress the most is good planning, good estimating, and the more comprehensive, the better. And that's really it.
That's great. Hey, Will, I was going to thank the other panelists, but he's gone. Thank you for being the solo participant on the hot seat today.
Thanks to all of you, our panelists, and our moderator for sharing your expertise. Please take a moment now to fill out a brief survey that will be posted in the chat so we can continue to improve these discussions and address topics that are important to you. Be sure to register for next month's town hall by visiting our website. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month.